Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling strangely tired? Not angry, not upset, just drained. Nothing bad happened. No argument. No awkward moment. And yet, something felt off. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. Sometimes, people feel that way after talking to us. They won't say anything. They won't confront you. They won't explain. They'll just reply slower, invite you less, keep things polite and distant. And if you've ever wondered, why do people drift away from me? Why do conversations feel flat lately? Why do I feel like I'm trying, but not connecting? This video is for you. Because being seen as boring is rarely about being uninteresting. It's almost always about unnoticed habits that quietly shut down emotional connection. And the hardest part, most of these habits feel normal, even harmless. Some of them feel like confidence, intelligence, or kindness. But inside the brain, they do the opposite. Today, I'm going to show you 10 subtle signs that people may experience you as exhausting or disengaging, even if they like you, and how to change each one without changing who you are. No fake charm. No loud personality. No pretending to be someone else. Just small shifts that make people feel more relaxed, more open, and more alive around you. And stay with me until the end, because I'll share a simple 10-second conversation reset that can completely change how people feel when they talk to you, even if social situations usually feel hard. Before we begin, one quick thing. If you value psychology-based insights that actually make your daily life easier, not surface-level motivation, subscribe to this channel. Because emotional growth isn't about learning one trick. It's about repetition. And repetition is how the brain truly changes. Alright, let's start with the first sign. And this one is so common that most people don't even realize they're doing it. Sign number 1. You judge people more than you realize. Not out loud, not aggressively, sometimes not even consciously. But it shows. In comments you make. In reactions you can't quite hide. In the way you talk about others when they're not present. Someone's choices, their lifestyle, their relationships, their mistakes. It might sound like honesty, or standards, or just being real. But emotionally, it lands very differently. When people sense judgment, even subtle judgment, their body tightens. They filter what they say. They become careful. Because the unspoken thought is always the same. If she talks about others like this, what does she say about me? That thought alone is enough to shut down connection. Judgment creates distance faster than silence. And here's the part most people don't expect. This habit rarely comes from feeling superior. It usually comes from self-protection. Judging others creates a sense of control. It gives the brain certainty. And certainty feels safe. But safety built on criticism is fragile. People don't relax around it. They perform. Now pause for a moment and reflect honestly. Do people hesitate before sharing good news with you? Do they downplay their excitement? Do they change the subject when things get personal? That's not because you're unkind. It's because judgment, even quiet judgment, doesn't feel emotionally safe. Here's the shift that changes everything. When you notice the urge to judge, don't suppress it. Redirect it. Silently ask yourself, what might make this make sense for them? What don't I know about their situation? What would compassion look like here? That single internal question softens your presence. It moves you from evaluation to understanding. And when people feel understood, they open. Because connection doesn't grow in environments of scrutiny. It grows in spaces where people feel free to be human. Sign number 2. Your conversations are too predictable. You tell the same stories. You use the same examples. You react the same way to the same topics. People know what's coming next. Even before you finish the sentence. Nothing is wrong with what you're saying. It's just familiar. And the human brain doesn't stay engaged with what feels already known. Predictability lowers curiosity. Curiosity is what keeps attention alive. So even when people like you, their mind slowly drifts. Now, this is where many people misunderstand the problem. Being predictable doesn't mean your life is boring. It means your mental input has become narrow. You've been thinking about the same things, consuming the same information, replaying the same interpretations. And without new input, conversation becomes repetition. Let me ask you something, be honest. Do you often reuse the same story because it gets a reliable reaction? Do you avoid unfamiliar topics because you don't want to sound unprepared? Do you stick to what you know because it feels safe? That makes sense. Familiarity reduces anxiety, but it also reduces energy. Here's the shift that changes how people experience you. You don't need a more exciting personality. You need small doses of novelty. Once a week, introduce one new input into your life. A documentary clip, a podcast idea, a short article, a new walking route, a different recipe. Then bring just one sentence of that into conversation. I learned something interesting this week. I heard a perspective that surprised me. I came across an idea I can't stop thinking about. That single sentence does something powerful. It wakes up curiosity in you and in others. Because interesting people aren't constantly entertaining. They're mentally alive. And that brings us to the final sign, the one that has the strongest emotional impact, even when no one says a word. Sign number 3. You miss the signals that the conversation is ending. This one is about social awareness, not intelligence. The other person isn't rude. They're not abrupt. They don't say, I'm bored. They show it quietly. Shorter answers. Less eye contact. Their body turning slightly away. A glance at the clock. A polite smile that doesn't fully engage. And you keep going. Not because you don't care, but because you don't notice. Or because silence feels uncomfortable. Or because stopping feels awkward. So you push through. What the other person experiences, though, is a loss of freedom. They don't feel connected. They feel stuck. And when people feel trapped in conversation, they associate that discomfort with you, not with the moment. Now pause and reflect honestly. Have people ever said, I really have to go, more than once? Do conversations with you often end abruptly instead of naturally? Do you feel uneasy when there's a pause and rush to fill it? This habit often comes from good intentions. You want to keep the connection alive. You don't want things to feel awkward. You want the moment to matter. But connection requires permission to exit. Emotionally intelligent people don't hold others in conversation. They release them. Here's the adjustment that changes how people experience you. When you sense energy dropping, name it gently. I don't want to keep you. We can pause this here. I realize I've been talking. How are you doing? That does something powerful. It gives the other person choice. It restores balance. And it creates respect. Ironically, when people feel free to leave, they often stay longer. Because presence feels best when it's voluntary. And now we move to the next sign. One that doesn't sound harmful at all, but quietly makes conversations feel repetitive and flat. Sign number 4. You're physically present, but mentally elsewhere. You're there. You're nodding. You're saying but part of you is drifting. Checking your phone. Thinking about what you'll say next. Mentally running through a to-do list while the other person is still talking. And even if you don't realize it, the other person feels it. Humans are incredibly sensitive to attention. We notice eye contact, timing, facial reactions, tiny pauses. When those signals don't match the words, the connection breaks. The message received isn't, she's busy. It's, I'm not fully here with you. And that lands deeper than most people think. When attention is divided, conversations lose warmth. They become transactional, forgettable. Now pause for a moment and check in with yourself. Do you often listen while preparing your response? Do you glance at your phone just for a second? Do people sometimes repeat themselves around you? This habit is rarely intentional. It comes from mental overload. When your mind is full, presence feels expensive. But presence is exactly what creates connection. Here's the adjustment that makes a noticeable difference. Choose one visible signal of attention. Just one. Turn your body fully toward the person. Put your phone face down. Repeat one phrase they said out loud. So you felt caught off guard. That part really stayed with you. That reflection does something powerful. It tells the other person, I heard you. You landed. You matter here. And once someone feels that, they naturally open up more. Because connection isn't built by multitasking. It's built by moments of undivided attention. And that takes us to the next sign, one that often goes unnoticed, but quietly makes people feel trapped in conversations. Sign number 5. You don't ask questions that invite people to open up. Conversations end, and you realize you talked. They talked. Information was exchanged. But nothing moved. This usually happens because the questions are too shallow, or because there are no real questions at all. How was your day? Busy. Oh yeah. And just like that, the the moment closes. Here's the truth most people don't say out loud. People don't feel connected by being heard once. They feel connected by being curious about. Curiosity tells the brain, I matter here. When you don't ask meaningful questions, the message isn't cruelty. It's indifference. And even kind people can sound indifferent without realizing it. Now ask yourself honestly, do you leave conversations knowing details, but not emotions? Do people rarely go deeper with you, even when the setting feels safe? Do conversations with you stay polite, but rarely personal? This habit often comes from fear. Fear of being intrusive. Fear of crossing a line. Fear of not knowing what to say next. So you stay on the surface. But depth doesn't come from intensity. It comes from invitation. Here's the shift that changes the energy completely. Replace factual questions with experience-based questions. Instead of, what do you do? Try, what's been taking most of your energy lately? Instead of, how was that? Try, how did that feel for you? Instead of, what's new? Try, what's something you've been thinking about a lot recently? These questions don't pressure. They open doors. And when someone chooses to walk through that door, they remember how you made them feel. Seen. Respected. Interesting. Because interesting people don't talk more. They listen differently. And that leads us to the next sign. One that feels normal in modern life, but quietly breaks emotional connection faster than almost anything else. Sign number 6. You interrupt people, especially when you're engaged or nervous. This one rarely comes from rudeness. Most of the time, it comes from urgency. You're listening, but your mind is already racing ahead. You know what you want to say. You're afraid you'll forget it. So you jump in. You finish their sentence. You cut in with a thought. You respond before they're truly done. And in your mind, it feels natural, helpful even. But to the other person, it feels very different. Interrupting sends a quiet message. What I'm about to say matters more than what you're saying right now, even when that's not what you mean. Over time, this creates a pattern. People start shortening their stories around you. They hesitate before speaking. They keep things surface level. Not because they don't trust you, but because their voice doesn't feel protected. Now pause and reflect for a moment. Do you often feel physical tension when someone speaks slowly? Do you feel the urge to jump in before they lose momentum? Do you interrupt more when you're excited, anxious, or trying to connect? If yes, your nervous system may be trying to control uncertainty. When we interrupt, we're often trying to reduce discomfort, not dominate. But real connection requires patience. Here's the shift that makes a difference. When someone finishes a thought, wait just 2 seconds. Silently count in your head. 1, 2, then speak. That pause does something powerful. It signals respect. It shows confidence. And it tells the other person, your words landed. It also calms your own system. Because you don't need to rush to be relevant. You already are. And when people feel unhurried around you, they feel safe. Which leads us to the next sign. One that seems harmless, but quietly makes conversations feel empty. Sign number 7. You unintentionally make every conversation circle back to you. This one isn't arrogance. It's anxiety disguised as relatability. Someone shares something personal, a challenge, a win, a worry, and almost automatically, your mind searches for a connection. You respond with your own experience, your own story, your own version of the feeling. At first, it sounds supportive, but over time, something shifts. The conversation stops feeling shared and starts feeling redirected. The other person slowly becomes a listener in your story, instead of the main character in theirs. Now be honest with yourself. Do you often jump in with, that happened to me too? Do you feel uncomfortable when the focus isn't on you? Do you worry that if you don't add your experience, you'll disappear from the moment? Here's the part most people don't realize. This habit often comes from a fear of being irrelevant. The brain learns, if I don't show how I relate, I won't matter. So it pulls the spotlight back. But emotional connection doesn't grow from similarity alone. It grows from attention. People feel close to those who make them feel seen. When every story becomes about you, the other person slowly closes. Not because they're offended, but because there's no room. Here's the adjustment that changes everything. Instead of matching their story with yours, expand theirs. Ask one more question. Invite one more detail. Stay with their experience, just a little longer. For example, instead of saying, that happened to me too, Try. What was the hardest part for you? How did that change the way you see things now? What did you need most in that moment? You can still share your story later. But when you lead with curiosity, people relax. Because being interesting isn't about being impressive. It's about being present. And that brings us to the next sign, one that feels small in the moment, but leaves a surprisingly strong emotional mark. Sign number 8. You complain in a way that makes people feel heavy. This one is tricky, because complaining feels normal. Sometimes it even feels necessary. You talk about the traffic, the job, the system, other people's behavior, how unfair things are. Individually, none of these topics are a problem. But when complaining becomes your default way of connecting, something subtle happens. The emotional energy in the room drops. People don't think, "She's negative." They feel it in their body first. Their shoulders tense. Their breath gets shallow. Their mood shifts, even if they don't know why. The human brain is wired to scan for problems. When someone constantly highlights what's wrong, everyone's nervous system quietly moves into alert mode. And alert mode is exhausting. So people start limiting exposure. Not consciously, not out of cruelty. They just protect their energy. Now pause for a second and ask yourself, when you vent, do you feel lighter afterward? Or do you feel even more irritated? Do conversations with you often spiral deeper into frustration? Do people rarely bring you good news, but often bring complaints? This habit usually isn't about negativity. It's about regulation. Many people complain because they don't know how to release tension safely. So they leak it socially. Here's the shift that makes a real difference. If you need to vent, frame it. Keep it short. Name what you're feeling. Then add one of these. What I really need right now is just to be heard. I'm not looking for solutions, just a minute to let this out. I'm working on not letting this ruin my day. That last part signals emotional responsibility. It tells the other person, you're not being pulled into my stress. You're safe here. And when people feel safe, they stay. Because being pleasant isn't about being positive all the time. It's about knowing how to release pressure without spreading it. And that leads us directly to the next sign, one that many people confuse with confidence, but that quietly pushes others away. Sign number 9. You respond with explanations when people are looking for understanding. Someone shares a frustration, a doubt, a difficult moment, and without noticing, you shift into explaining mode. You analyze the situation. You offer context. You point out patterns. You suggest solutions. Everything you say is intelligent, logical, often accurate, but something feels off. Instead of feeling closer, the other person grows quieter. Here's what's happening beneath the surface. When someone opens up emotionally, their brain isn't asking for clarity. It's asking for safety. In that moment, the emotional part of the brain wants to know, am I understood? Am I allowed to feel this? When you jump straight into explanations, you skip that step. And even though your intention is to help, the message received is often, my feelings need to be fixed. I'm being analyzed. I'm alone in this. This habit doesn't come from arrogance. It usually comes from insecurity. Many people learned early on that being useful was the fastest way to be accepted. So they became problem solvers, clarifiers, the person with the answer. And over time, they forgot something important. Connection happens before insight. Let me ask you something, and answer honestly. Do you feel uncomfortable when you don't have something smart to add? Do you rush to explain because silence makes you anxious? Do you feel responsible for making things better when someone shares pain? If yes, this sign might be closer than you think. Here's the shift that changes everything. Before you explain, reflect. Name what you heard. Acknowledge the emotion underneath. Something as simple as, that sounds really frustrating. Of course that hurt. I can see why that would feel overwhelming. Then, and only then, ask, do you want advice, or do you just want to vent? That single question does something powerful. It gives control back to the other person. It creates emotional safety. And it tells their nervous system, you're not being judged here. Ironically, when you stop trying to sound helpful, people experience you as far more supportive. And now we move to the next sign, one that quietly drains the energy of every room it enters, even when no one says a word. Sign number 10. You turn conversations into long monologues without realizing it. This one is subtle because you're not trying to dominate the conversation. You're just talking, Someone shares a small moment from their life, a trip, a frustration, a thought, and almost instantly, your mind jumps in with a story of your own. Your experience, your version, your example. Before you notice, you've been speaking for minutes straight. The other person is still nodding, still polite, still listening, but mentally they've checked out. Here's why this happens. A healthy conversation works like a game of catch. One person throws the ball, the other catches it, and throws it back. But when someone speaks in long blocks, the game changes. The ball never comes back. And the human brain gets tired very quickly when it doesn't get a turn. Inside the brain, attention is tied to engagement. Short exchanges keep curiosity alive. Long monologues quietly drain it. So people don't stop talking to you because they dislike you. They stop because it feels exhausting. Now, be honest with yourself for a moment. Have you ever finished a story, looked at the other person, and realized they haven't spoken in a while? Have you ever felt relieved when you finally stopped talking, but also slightly awkward? That's not a character flaw. It's a habit. And for many people, this habit comes from anxiety, not ego. Your brain is trying to stay relevant, to prove value, to avoid silence, so it keeps talking. Here's the simple fix, and this changes everything. Think in short waves instead of long speeches. Say one clear thought, add one small detail, share one emotion or insight, then pause and invite the other person back in. For example, work has been intense lately. Deadlines everywhere. Honestly, it's been messing with my sleep. How has it been for you? That question does something powerful. It tells the other person, you matter here. There's room for you. This isn't a performance, it's a connection. And something interesting happens when you do this. Conversations feel lighter. People open up more. And you don't leave feeling drained or guilty afterward. Because connection isn't about saying more. It's about making space. And that brings us to the next sign, one that often hides behind intelligence and good intentions. Let's take a breath and look at what we've covered. Being perceived as boring is rarely about personality. It's about patterns. Patterns shaped by stress, by anxiety, by coping mechanisms that once helped you survive, but no longer help you connect. The good news? Patterns can change, not through performing, not through becoming louder or more entertaining, but through awareness. When you speak a little less and invite more, when you explain less and reflect more, when you judge less and stay curious, people don't just hear you differently, they feel differently around you. And that feeling is what makes someone want to stay. Now, if this video resonated, I want to share something with you. If you'd like to go deeper into your emotional development, I created a practical emotional self-mastery guide to support you. It was designed to help you regulate your emotions and build inner stability step by step, at your own pace without pressure. You'll find the guide in the pinned comment below. No rush, just something to support you if you feel ready. Before we end, I want to leave you with one final question. Which of these signs felt uncomfortable? Not because it was wrong, but because it was familiar. That's usually where growth begins. If this video helped you see yourself more clearly, take a moment to like it. If you want more psychology-based conversations like this, subscribe. And if you feel called, share this with someone you trust. Not as criticism, but as an invitation to grow together. Because emotional growth isn't about becoming someone new. It's about becoming more present as who you already are. I'll see you in the next one.